Today, we're going to dig into a really powerful argument about our cities and the money that makes them run. The main idea is pretty simple, but it's kind of a bombshell. The entire game has changed, all because money figured out how to move.
So let's kick things off with a belief that you see all over the place, especially online. It's the idea that when you get down to it, wealthy people don't really have a choice about taxes. You know, that their money is stuck in one place, so they just have to pay whatever the government asks. But is that actually true anymore? And this comment right here, this is from a real social media thread, and it just perfectly captures that skepticism. It's basically a dare, right? The assumption is, come on, rich people don't actually pack up and move just to dodge taxes. Well, the author of the piece we're looking at saw this and had a few thoughts. And here's the author's answer right off the bat. Remember Facebook's co-founder? Yeah, he moved to Singapore. The famous French actor Gerard Depardieu, he literally fled to Belgium and then Russia to protest high taxes. And we've all seen the stories about people leaving California for Austin and Miami, or New Yorkers heading for the suburbs. The examples are, well, they're everywhere once you start looking for them.
This brings us to the most important point of the whole argument. The idea that your zip code is some kind of permanent binding contract is just old thinking. For high earners, choosing where to live is now a financial decision, and it's a decision they can, and absolutely do, rethink every single year when it's time to file their taxes. To really get why this is such a huge deal now, we've got to take a step back in time, back to an era when things were completely different, a time when capital couldn't just pack its bags and leave town. The author uses this fantastic metaphor. Money used to be heavy. Think about it. It was physically tied to the ground. It was massive steel mills. It was railroad tracks. It was giant bank vaults filled with actual cash and gold. You couldn't just move a Rockefeller-sized fortune to another country overnight. It was literally locked in place by tons of concrete and steel. And what was the result of all that heavy money? Well, because capital was basically trapped, governments had an incredible amount of power. They could set top marginal tax rates at over 90%. They could do that because they knew there was simply nowhere for that money to run. And this wasn't just a quick thing either. We're talking about decades. From funding World War II all the way through the Great Society programs in the 60s, this super high tax environment was just normal. It was a completely different economic universe, and it was all built on the fact that wealth couldn't move. But then, everything changed. That old world of heavy money just kind of dissolved. Capital became something else. It became weightless, almost like vapor. This slide really lays out the huge shift. We went from capital that was bound to one place to capital that's instantly mobile, from wealth that was trapped by physical stuff to wealth that moves with the click of a mouse. And maybe the most important change of all, taxation went from being a form of coercion, basically a demand, to a form of courtship, like an invitation. So how did this all happen? The author argues it was basically a perfect storm. You had deregulation in the 80s that opened up the financial floodgates. You had new tech like fiber optic cables that made billion-dollar transfers happen in a split second. Even physical things got more mobile thanks to global container shipping. And on top of all that, you had these incredibly complex financial tools like trusts and shell companies that make wealth almost impossible to pin down. Okay, so this new reality of vaporous money, it creates a massive, massive problem for cities. Because cities need a stable tax base to actually function. And suddenly, that base can just disappear. Here's another really powerful analogy the author uses. Think of a city's tax base as frogs in a pan of water. If you raise the temperature slowly, they might just sit there. But if you turn up the heat too fast, with a sudden new tax or big drop in quality of life, those frogs are going to jump right out and find a cooler pan. And this is exactly how that frog's leap plays out in the real world. The author describes this totally predictable cycle. First, a city proposes a big tax hike. The high earners feel the water getting hot, and they start making panicked calls to real estate agents in Florida or Texas. Then, they leave. And what happens next? The city, facing a huge budget hole, has to cool the water back down, offering tax breaks and other incentives to try and get them to come back. Now, it's really important to understand who these frogs are. The author isn't just talking about a handful of billionaires. They actually coined this amazing term, the princess and the P class. These are high-earning professionals. Think doctors, lawyers, software engineers. They're super sensitive to these changes because, unlike billionaires, they can't change the rules where they live, but they absolutely have the money to just move. And this chart really shows you why that group matters so much. The author calls them the invisible scaffolding holding up a city's budget. While billionaires get all the media attention, it's this huge group of professionals that provides most of the tax revenue for everything: schools, transit, public services. So when they leave, the whole structure starts to shake. What you end up with is this constant, high-stakes game of chicken. A city threatens to raise taxes, and its most mobile, highest-earning residents threaten to walk. And in this new world of vaporous, weightless wealth, the author argues that the city is almost always the one that has to swear first. So this brings us to the author's really startling conclusion about the new laws of physics that govern our cities. It's not about left-wing or right-wing politics anymore. It's about something much more fundamental, something like gravity. The entire dynamic has been turned on its head. In the past, taxation was coercion. The city's stance was pay your tribute. Now it's courtship. The city's stance is please, please build here. And the best example of this is that whole Amazon HQ2 search, that massive beauty contest where cities all over the country were falling over themselves offering billions in tax breaks just to woo one company. And you see this courtship everywhere, right? Cities are constantly chasing these huge, flashy projects: a gleaming new stadium, an innovation corridor, a bid for the Olympics. According to the author, these projects aren't just about civic pride. They're basically coded invitations designed to signal to mobile capital, hey, we're business friendly, come here.
And that leaves us with this final, pretty haunting question from the author. We're living in an age of portable money, which also means portable loyalty. So if the people with the resources can always just jump to a cooler pan, what happens to our cities? And more importantly, what does that mean for the people who are left behind? It's a really powerful thought to end on.